Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for waiting. Welcome to an Innovate discussion panel. We will be talking about how everything is on fire and we're all going to die. I will be taking, for the purpose of this debate, the most pessimistic stance and position possible. I am not that pessimistic in person. I am doing it just for the discussion that we're having today. And I'll basically be pitching some doomsday scenarios to our panel here, who will introduce themselves.
Okay, I'll start. Pete Coman, I'm the founder of INDESIGN Technologies, a consulting firm. So I like to refer to ourselves as technology architects because my mum still doesn't understand what I do. So that's probably the best way that I describe our services.
Hello, I'm Nick ORSATTI. I'm Director of FREDON Technology and AV Integrator. And we design and install audiovisual systems and increasingly systems that sit in the converged IT world. So, please.
Okay, I'm Peter Hunt. I'm also the founder of HEWSHOTT International. We're a global consulting firm, offices in 5 countries around the world. Very similar role to what Peter Coman described.
Let's start off with the convergence of AV and IT. Right, we've seen the two industries merge, and my fear is that if we continue down this route, AV as an industry is just going to get swallowed up by IT and we will cease to exist. I would love to hear your thoughts about that.
I think it's only a matter of time. Yeah, absolutely. I think once we can agree on a common standard for AV over IP, I think that streaming will become native. Right? There are already standards-based codecs out there. There's displays that have got HEWSHOTT 264, HEWSHOTT 265 built into it, but I think it's only a matter of time before the source devices actually stream natively. So, yeah, as I said, for me, I just think it's a matter of time before that actually happens, and I think that will be led from IT.
Interesting concept. I actually think it's a fantastic opportunity. I think that we've barely scratched the surface of the opportunities that are in front of us. And I also think that the juggernaut, which is IT, we should have been on board with them a long time ago. And I have been quoted in writing about this about 15 years ago to say that AV needs to get on board with IT. We've been slow to adopt, there's no doubt about that, but the adoption rate is happening very quickly now. The only thing that worries me slightly is that AV just becomes another commodity on the network, and I think that the traditional analog elements of what makes something look good and what makes something sound good is an element that we still need to focus on making sure we retain.
It's interesting you use the word commodity because I was waiting for one of us to bring it up first. There's no question that a lot of what we do, what we've done traditionally, is being commoditized. As Pete rightly pointed out, devices are getting smarter. They are interoperating in the IT world more seamlessly, I think. But to Peter's point, it doesn't make it doesn't give us. I think there is an opportunity because there still needs to be subject matter experts with how the devices talk, how the people talk, utilize that technology. We still need to design systems so people can hear and see people. We still need to make sure that that's all coordinated in architecturally, for our clients. We need to understand the use cases on how that technology will be used. We see a plethora of people now with choices. UC is a classic example. How many different UC platforms? People will choose different paths and roadmaps, but they still need to be guided. So I think there's still an opportunity. It's just how we fit into that ecosystem. Yeah?
I agree. IT systems are just a transmission method. They get signals from point A to point B. And I've also been in writing to say rubbish in equals rubbish out. If you have poor quality microphones, if you don't have speakers in the right place, if you put cameras in environments where the lighting is poor, the signal going into the IT system is it should be replicated exactly the same as the other end coming out. So if it's poor going in, it's going to be poor coming out. And I think those elements that dictate what is a good quality signal in the first place those are the areas that may be diluted with the influx of the IT systems coming on board.
I don't disagree. However, I think that we as an industry are a lot more judgmental of what quality is. So we have a higher standard than the end user, where they're saying, I'm quite happy to watch Foxtel or whatever on their mobile device, and they probably couldn't tell the difference between H.264 and whatever the best proprietary streaming protocol is at the moment. So we're a very inward-facing industry. Not a bad thing, but we're not the end users.
One thing that's come about is the generation of children going through school and going through university today have grown up with iPhones in their pockets and iPads strapped around their waists. And they're coming into the marketplace now expecting to use these devices like that with no barriers and no restrictions. Equally, what goes along with that is an acceptance of a lower quality picture, lower quality sound. I do agree with that. But just because that's the case, it doesn't mean that we have to accept it. We should, as an industry, strive to continue to develop and deliver good quality signals in the analog domain so that when they get broadcast or transmitted over IP, they're good quality signals at the output stage as well.
A lot of really interesting topics there, and I want to explore the balance between art and science, which our industry has always treaded really well. And what I'm seeing is the erosion of the art side with commoditization, standardization, moving to IP networks. And that, to me, feels like a loss of skill, so to speak, a loss of expertise. We've seen it in the IT world, right? Like IT integrators, their jobs are difficult, yes, but they do not require that much design or that much thinking as us in AV. So with that in mind, and the fact that we can all agree IT is going to be our new overlord, should we just be looking to get acquired by a big IT integrator or an IT consultancy and ride off in the sunset with bags of money?
What do you mean by art?
As an industry, anyone
Right.
who's running a business in the AV world currently, in
Right.
the AV industry, integrators, consultancies, should you just be plumping your project, so to speak, to be as attractive to a possible acquisition as can be? Because we've seen multiple acquisitions of AV companies, be it integrators or consultancies across Asia Pacific, where IT people are really looking to acquire these expertise, bring them on board, rather than working hand in hand or collaborating.
Yeah, I think once again it's going to be one. It's going to merge into one.
Yeah.
Right? And we're already seeing it. We're seeing certain integrators putting their hand up and doing design and consulting. We're seeing manufacturers offering design services, typically for free. So I just see all this, and especially with what we're just talking about with AV over IP and with IT, and we've got more integrated devices. Suddenly, we just need a screen on the wall that's got a camera or a microphone, speakers built in, like all in one device. Like I don't know. I just see it that it is just one. It will just be what it is. It'll just merge. I don't think no one is staying within their lanes. Basically, that's what I'm saying. In the past, we used to do our thing. We're just not seeing that now. And I think it'll just get worse moving forward. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I think the way it's going to be.
I think multidisciplinary is not a new word. It's happened. It's happened from the dawn of time in consultancies. The consultancy businesses have had huge success in a multidisciplinary field. Equally, bespoke and specialised services also have their place as well. It's not horses, courses. The same thing happens in integrators. I work for a multidisciplinary integrator. I am one of many services. Some of my clients see value in that. Others want bespoke and niche services. I think the landscape, the changing landscape is just what we're all dealing with. Clients have the same thing. I've had clients. My clients were originally facilities people back in the day, 10 years ago. They're now increasingly talking IT language, and it's about the skill set that we need to adopt to move in a changing economy. I think there's still merit in doing what you're doing. Ultimately, you've got to provide value to your client, and you've got to understand what their needs are and give them the best solution forward.
And on top of that, you've got software like X10 AV coming out now that, if you've got a little bit of knowledge, a little bit of AV knowledge, you can, draw a schematic, create a bill of materials, cable schedule, all in a couple of minutes, right? So that the art I think is disappearing. I think everything's becoming simplified, whether it be artificial intelligence software like X10 or more intelligent products that are all in one. I don't think that the knowledge, as much knowledge is required to do what we used to do.
Peter Hunt, we've had this chat multiple times about
I don't
the
wish all
value
this to
of our
happen. This is
expertise.
what I get paid to do.
Yeah.
I don't want it to happen. I just
Aren't you
being
scared?
realistic.
Aren't you scared that robots are going to take over your job and AI is going to do what
It's
you
only a
do?
matter of time. It's like being a truck driver and in 20 years complaining that they don't have a job anymore because of autonomous trucks. You had 20 years to make a decision to change what you do.
So what's your game plan? You
Drive a truck. Do something. No, I just don't think that there's a future in what we do. Like 5 years' time. Like, sure, there'll be niche areas. We used to design huddle spaces. We don't design huddle spaces anymore. There's nothing to design. It's quite simple, right? So I don't know. I'm looking for a job actually now. So no, I'm kidding.
Mr. Hunt, can you please stand up for our industry and say that
Of
we still
course.
provide value?
We do provide value, and the way that we provide value is twofold. There are those, what I keep calling those analog skills. There's original traits that those of us who've been in the industry a long time grew up learning about, and they should always be there. What makes something sound nice in a reverberant space? Why do you choose those speakers? How loud they should be? Where should they be? And why should they be there? That is not something that an IT guy or an IT department or an IT industry can tell you to do. They just can't do it. However, we are not in that space. We are now in an IT. We are in a division of the IT industry. The AV that's exactly where we sit. So how does AV get successfully delivered? It's broken, in my opinion, into two areas. We have the specification and the product supply, and then we have the programming side of it. And those are the two distinct areas that this industry is going to have to get used to playing in if it's going to be successful moving forwards. And you all know as well as I do that when you put a screen on the wall or a microphone on the table or cameras and speakers, they don't do anything until the system is programmed. So the skill actually in making these do what the client wants it to do is in the programming, not necessarily in the product. Of course, the product selection is important, but that product won't do anything until it's correctly programmed. And I think that in 3 to 5 years' time, we will see an industry of suppliers who supply equipment, and we'll see an industry of programmers who then program the equipment to deliver the outcome. And that will be entirely dependent on the client's IT network, the client's IT and enterprise level security processes and protocols and all those other things. And that's why, as an industry, we've got to be talking to these IT people right at the very beginning of the project, not 3/4 of the way through it, and then expecting our stuff to go on it and expecting them to comply.
Thank you so much. Let's jump on to the manufacturer side for a bit. I know that you guys provide services, but there has to be product that you guys need to supply as well, like you just mentioned. We're talking about standardization and the fact that the move to IP means that hardware needs to kind of fit certain builds and tick certain boxes. I feel that we as an industry are not going to decide these checklists. These checklists are going to be dictated to us by people like the Microsofts, the Dells, the HPs, and so on. You can go to any manufacturer booth right now and they will proudly talk about their association and their partnerships with these bigger tech players. But do we really have a seat at that table? Can we actually tell these guys, this is what we want, can you provide for us? I feel not.
I'm afraid I agree with you. We're not at that point. As an industry, we're not at that point yet. The biggest AV manufacturing company in the world is probably worth 1.6, 1.7, maybe if they're on a lucky day, it might be $2 billion. But that's a drop in the ocean compared to the size of the IT industry. It really is. And we're just not big enough to be able to make an impact on the IT industry. So we therefore have to comply with them. I think it was in your magazine many, many years ago, I wrote and I said, we need to get on the train and in the cab and start steering how this whole technology piece is going, not just be a passenger at the back. And unfortunately, we didn't do that strong enough and it's now catching up with us. So no, we're not, and I'm afraid as an industry, we're a big industry. I don't know what the figures are, $200 and $300 billion worldwide, I think, every year. That it really is, it's tiny compared to the IT industry. So why would we command a seat at the table? What is it that we need to do in order to get there? I'm afraid I don't know the answer to that. That's sort of the magic pill that somebody's got to come up and swallow one day.
I think hardware is one thing. I think the real people we look at is people who provide software, right? Because we mentioned a couple of different manufacturers in the IT space. They're all doing the same thing. We look now at the proliferation of unified comms. Yeah, that's been around for a long, long time. It hasn't necessarily been as well adopted because the user experience wasn't great. These days now, with a much more prolific and deeper connectivity, the experience is pretty good. It's comparable to the point where, if you're a hardware manufacturer, you're really struggling unless you've got a good software alternative to that. So I think really the people that we really need to be making, to your point, Peter, was really around how the software works. And let's not also forget that somebody needs to use these systems, right? Why is a software UC works now where it didn't 5 years ago? Because it's a lot easier to use. People can walk in, they can use the system, and they can get on with the day-to-day of conducting their business rather than worrying about that tech stack. To your point, Peter, you were talking about huddle spaces being easy to design. They're really easy to design, agree, from a hardware perspective, but how they coexist in the workflow of a user to walk in, use the system and so forth, isn't necessarily as easy as that. And I think the opportunity for us is to start talking about workspace, workflow design and planning and getting involved in those conversations. IT consultancies aren't what they used to be, but a lot of them are moving more into that utilisation space and offering value and services. Am I unhappy about the fact that I maybe won't be bolting TVs on walls shortly? I'm not unhappy about that. I mean, it's really, I'm more happy about trying to make a dollar providing value-added services, and ongoing support and so forth. And these are the things where, to the converse point, I think we're, I think a lot of the IT services providers don't want to deal with it. It's like on a periphery. Yes, we're going to do desktop support and so forth, but I don't know how to deal with the nuances of how a meeting system works. I know it needs to work well, and maybe there's a niche service providers in theirs, but having that conversation and and trying to get a seat at the table is the tough part, I think. Yeah.
I think the biggest issue is that the IT guy is the gatekeeper these days. So if it's got a Cisco badge on it or a Microsoft badge on it, then it's all good, right? We've had situations where we've had a client say to us, there's like a 55-inch all-in-one display in a 20-person meeting room, and they're saying, well, Cisco or whoever told us that was all right. Well, screen's not big enough, the audio quality is not good enough. There's all those kinds of things. So they're following the lead of what they're being told by these IT organisations. It's very hard for us to get a seat at the table because we kind of talk a different language, and we have done for some time. And I think the players, AV-wise, the only manufacturers that are going to survive are going to be, we're always going to need speakers, we're always going to need cameras, microphones and displays.
You mentioned we need to start looking at software, and we need to start benefiting from that software. And if you look at the consumer world, that's what's happening, right? You don't own anything anymore, you just rent it until you die. No one's having that conversation in AV, right? You can walk the floor right now, and no one is talking about a subscription data model or a subscription payment model or monetization of data or AV as a service. And we've seen trends from the consumer industry really impact how we do business here in the AV world as well. And that conversation, according to me, is still not being taken very, very seriously. Everyone's kicking the can to 5 years down the road. What do you guys think about it?
I think you're talking about from a control point of view, and I think,
and just generally the data that AV has access to
sure.
and sits on, which is probably we do nothing with it.
Sure, I think once again those those big four, your Googles, your Amazons, your Microsofts, Apples to a lesser extent, they will dictate what is acceptable. And at the moment, from a control point of view, we're talking about consumerisation, and it doesn't cost me anything to control devices at home through Google or through Amazon. It's free. So I think, once again, there's an expectation that'll be free. And that may be in return for the data. So you might find companies like Utologies or those kinds of companies, they'll say, look, we've got an option. You can either pay for the software or have it as a subscription, which is their preferred model, Or we'll give it to you for free, but we get the data. And then they may do something with that data. I mean, you look at, that's really Google's model, isn't it?
Yep.
Right? They get their devices in everywhere and they use the data and they make the money out of the data. They're not making money on a $129 colour touchscreen. Yeah, so I think it's that IT model, that free model, that consumerisation will make its way into the workplace, and that's how we'll be moving forward.
I'm probably on the other side of that fence, if I'm honest with you. I think there's a lot of security-related restrictions in allowing that model to be successfully deployed in a business environment. You deal with any of the major banks, you deal with anybody who handles anybody else's money, and they are just going to shut the place down. I am fully aware of one particular product in one very large organisation in Hong Kong where they didn't realise that the screens were able to be interrogated by the manufacturer so they could actually see what was on the screens. And when they found that out, all those screens were removed from site. And so there are big issues around this. Dealing with other people's money and what have you is a big problem. And at home, you don't have that issue so much. In the workplace, it does exist. So I think some of those barriers to entry are still going to be there. I do think, though, that to go back to your question around how the AV industry needs to look at this, it's a major step change for the industry. The industry has grown up over the last 30-odd years of cottage suppliers and slightly bigger ones, supplying products, supplying design services, supplying programming services, and then maintaining it afterwards. And that has grown and grown and grown into what we have today. If that's not the model moving forwards, then I think you're probably right, it isn't. How does everybody out there who runs an AV company change to address that? And how quickly should that change be, and what happens during the transition process? There's a lot of thinking to be done, and I suspect if anybody is starting an AV company today, they should be starting it along the model you talked about, if I'm honest with you.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of horses for courses. I think everybody who sits there with a connected home at home knows exactly what Peter's talking about. I don't have a custom control system in my house. Google does everything for me, and it could be Siri or it could be whatever. It all just works there. Equally, I have plenty of clients who that is not anywhere near acceptable from a security and who owns my data. Why is it acceptable for me at home? Because it's the benefit I get out of giving away my usage patterns and so forth is worth the cost of me not having to have the automation that I'm used to. Corporates have a different set of rules. I think it's horses for courses. Some companies, a startup business where they're in that model and they're selling that model, they go, well, I'm happy for my data to go elsewhere. In something that's more traditional in the banking or things where there's big dollars at stake for that information, it's going to be there. It's about riding that change. I agree with you that if I was starting things today, I'd be having a different tack to what I did 10 years ago or 20 years ago.
So as an integrator, how do you see your business model moving in the next 3 to 5 years, given what's coming down the horizon?
Selling less product and selling more services. Really. And that's hard, because I rely on making money on the products that I sell. And it's tough to sometimes find that value in the services, as we all do. You guys sell your services, and that story better than we do. The challenge is how you migrate to that. I think that's the biggest problem for me. Because if I stopped selling boxes tomorrow, I'd have a very different looking business. Very much staff count as well as the IP. The other thing that I will say is that, one of the things that we've always hold true is that, when you talk about programming or you talk about that finessing of a product, to meet that outcome, a lot of it is about having that hands-on interaction with the devices, knowing what those issues are, and then having conversations with people to make sure that they understand what the advantages and the pitfalls are. And if you're not living and breathing and touching that product and deploying that, you lose a fair bit of knowledge very quickly. So it's how you skill up for that.
So what do you think about scenarios where clients sort of take an attitude, look, it's a screen on the wall, it costs a couple of grand. If it goes wrong after 3 years, I'll just take it down and put another one up because it will be brighter and sharper and cheaper. And how do you deal with that mindset?
I think you can't do anything but go along with that. I've had conversations with clients where I've talked about, screens are a good example of that. Is that they're a consumable that you pay over 3 years. 3, 5 years, whatever your life cycle is. I think the conversations really talk about more about life cycle management and fight the fights that you can fight. I don't think you can change the fact. Sorry, microphone management here.
I've just stopped arguing.
Yeah.
If that's what they want, that's what they want, right? And it's hard. I mean, you think about it. You specify a commercial panel, and they say, well, I can go down to JB Hi-Fi and I can buy the same brand, the same size, the same resolution at a third of the price. It's a pretty hard argument to win. I think what we'll end up seeing is that some of the manufacturers have got sort of different tiers. So they've got commercial, hospitality, consumer. I think it'll just end up being one panel. I think that'll be it. So we won't have this issue at all. Certain organisations struggle with that, like distributors struggle with it, where they're turning around, they have that battle all the time, right? Where, they're selling the commercial panel and then people going, but, I want the consumer panel because it's cheaper. So as I said, we just get to the point where we can tell them what the pitfalls are and why we recommend it, and if they go against it, they go against it, and they're aware of it. It's not.
They sometimes have to learn their lessons the hard way too, right?
Maybe, but also the consumer product is getting better and better as well. So
yeah. I recently, I think like most AV people, I've always got holes in my shoes, if I'm a cobbler, and so I recently upgraded my TV and just worked out how good current generation smart TVs are, because 5 years ago they were kind of, and they've come a long way, and I think, you can't really fight that. A manufacturer is always going to push the boundaries to make their products smarter. They want you to buy more. They do want that standardization. Buy more from less amount of people, and I think you just have to deal with that.
Consumers want to work and use the stuff they want to use now. They're not coming to you for you to tell them, hey, this is what you need. They know what they want.
They're more educated these days. Let's face it.
Yeah, I think the last question that I want to touch on before our time's up was, you mentioned that no one's staying in their lane anymore, right? You've got manufacturers who are going direct to client, doing a bit of design. You've got integrators who are doing a bit of consultancy. And our industry kind of settled on the established roles of consultant, integrator, distributor, end user after years and years and years of doing business, right? And we're in a period of disruption, which is why we're seeing all these shifts. I want everyone from the panel to just give me, where do you think the dice are going to land? Like, are we actually going to have like one-stop shops for everyone's going to try and be that, or are we going to deviate back to what was the norm with everyone in their defined roles? What do you think's going to be the outcome in, say, 5 years, 10 years time, once we've gone through this little period of disruption?
Integrators will become installers. Sorry, Nick, you'll just be hanging screens, and I'll be looking for a job.
I think the lanes are disappearing and will continue to disappear. I mean, whatever provides value to a client is ultimately what's going to win. As Pete rightly pointed out, Michael Dell really changed the paradigm of how to sell computers by going with a direct model, and that stood the test of time, and it forced an evolution of change in that industry where all of the traditionals had to follow suit. I don't think you can stand, and say, no, this isn't going to happen to me. It is. It's happening now, and ultimately, the laws of economics apply to us all. We're all here to make a buck, and it's how you make that dollar and how you dice that up is going to be really your value proposition. If you're giving away your smarts, time to stop doing that. Really, start, because one day the margin that you'd be making on other stuff that is going to turn into a commodity will go away, and you'll end up with no business. So,
I think this is a topic in its own right, worth half an hour if you want my honest opinion. But the problem with the lanes changing is you end up with car crashes. And whilst I do agree with both of what you're saying, the lanes are changing, and the car crashes are going to happen. And I think the I'm not looking for a job. We're very busy, and we're one of a handful or so consultants in Australia. We're up against 10 times that number or 20 times that number in terms of AV integrators. And I'll just part on one little point. We did a project. The client suddenly thought that we were over-specifying stuff and it was wrong, and they wanted to save a bit of money, so they entered into direct negotiations with the integrator and they chopped some stuff out. I had a phone call about a week ago saying, can you come back in because our meeting room's not working properly? So I went back in and I listened, and they've reduced the number of microphones, they haven't done the acoustic treatment in the room, and this is the reason why it's not working. And the client was looking for somebody to blame, and she said to me, it's your fault. I said, how can it be my fault when you didn't follow the specification that we did? So then she started looking for somebody else to hang. And the problem we have in this industry is that people are very quick to blame each other. And I think all of us, consultants, integrators and manufacturers and distributors, you need to stand up and be counted. When something goes wrong, you say, it was my fault, I got that wrong, you dig deep and you fix it. And there's too much finger pointing going on, and I think there needs to be more ownership of these issues when they come about. And then, as an industry, we'll become more professionalized and more accountable, and I think that's when we start aligning ourselves better with the IT model that we all aspire to.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.